When I was first interested in getting started with watercolors, I was super intimidated by them, and like so much so that I didn't even really know how to set them up. I couldn't even get started with learning how to actually paint because I couldn't set them up. And so, in case you're having the same problem, I want to share with you how I set up my watercolor workstation. This is the setup that works best for me. You might find that you like yours differently, especially if you're left-handed, because I am right-handed. Okay, first you're going to need a good light source. I'm in front of my window, but it's rainy out, so the light's a little dim. If you're using a lamp, try to use a daylight bulb, not like mine. You don't want the yellow light, because the yellow light will make your colors look wrong, and then you'll go back to look at it the next day, and they will look totally off, not what you meant them to be at all. So next you're going to need your paper. I'm using a piece of Strathmore 140 pound, 300 gram cold press. Use whatever you want, but just make sure it's watercolor paper because it can handle all that water you're going to be dumping on it. Copy paper, sketching paper, those things are not going to work and they're just going to frustrate you. Then you're going to need your paints. I have tube watercolors. If you have pan or you like pan better, that is fine. And you really only need, I have a lot in here, right? I mean, that's a lot of paints, but you really only need a red, a yellow, and a blue to start with. If you want to stretch yourself, a warm red, a cool red, a warm blue, a cool blue, a warm yellow, and a cool yellow are nice because you can get more mixes, but just having the three to start with is definitely workable. And then as you go, you can get more things and find more mixes that you can make. Now you're going to need water. I like using a squeeze bottle for adding the water to the paint that I'm going to actually be mixing. And then you're going to need 2 containers for water. And you want to make sure that you keep one of these with clean water in it, and one of them is going to be for rinsing the dirty brushes. And that way you always have clean water to put on your painting. And since I'm not near a sink, I keep a jug here for clean water, and then I have a jug for grubby water. And when my water gets too dirty from rinsing, I dump it in the grubby water one and then refill it with this one. If you're next to a sink, then you don't have to worry about that at all. It's a lot easier. Next you're gonna need a palette. This spiffy little sucker is ceramic, and so I put it on a felt so that it doesn't get hurt. You can also use plastic palettes like these. You can find these little guys for pretty cheap at most art or craft stores. I really like them for painting outside because they're tough. You know, I don't like to bring this guy out because I don't want it to break, but these, they're tough. I even had my dog chew up one of them and it still works. And you can reactivate watercolor paint. So I do tend to keep, if I mix too much, I tend to keep it in the palette and then I just use it later for something else. Sometimes it's a fun challenge to try to use only what's in one of the palettes and make a painting with that. Oh, something to watch out for though with the little ones, especially this guy. This one's pretty grounded, but this, because they're round on the bottom, they tend to tip over really easily. And so I've dumped paint all over my paintings a few times by knocking into the edge of it. So you want to be careful of that. Okay, and you'll need a washcloth or other absorbent rag for blotting extra paint or water off of your brushes. I also like to keep a paper towel handy because they're nice for helping lift off paint if I mess up. You know, you can dab it off. I also keep a piece of scrap watercolor paper for testing my paints to make sure that the colors and values are what I wanted them to be. You'll probably also want a pencil and an eraser because sometimes it's nice to be able to sketch out your painting beforehand. You want to use a pencil with a light lead. Mine is an H. The light lead is nice because it erases easily, but you have to be careful that you don't push really hard or it will crease the paper because this is a very hard lead. The softer lead pencils, such as the 4B and the 8B, all those guys are fantastic for drawing, for shading and blending and making really nice depth, but they are not so good for the watercolor because they will smear when you put paint over them. They're hard to erase, things like that. So you generally want to stick with a lighter lead, a lighter, harder lead for watercolor paper. All right, and brushes. You'll need brushes. I started out with just these two. This is a 1/2 inch 13 millimeter Winsor & Newton flat. It's really nice for laying down smooth areas of color. Those are called washes. And this is my favorite brush. It is a number 6 liner, Golden Edge by Grumbacher. I use this all the time, probably more than any other brush. So if you can only get a couple brushes at first, that's okay. You don't have to worry about it. You can still make a lot of art with them. Like, for example, these are some illustrations that I made, some of my earliest ones that I made with just those 2 brushes and mostly just the Golden Edge. And you can see that you can do quite a lot of stuff with them. So don't worry if you don't have more than that. If you can, it's nice to have some other ones though, like these rounds right here. This one is a number 12 Golden Edge Grumbacher, and this one is a little guy, a 2. This one's a number 2 round. This one I love for really little detail work. And you can also get a fan brush. These are nice for foliage and things like that. They make really cool strokes, although I have not used mine very much yet. I need to practice more with this one. The rounds are nice because they hold a lot of water, but they also come to a pretty fine point. And so you can do big areas, but then get in really tiny with the details. They're handy. I also like to keep some crappy brushes. This one I like to use just for mixing my paint together in my palette. I don't use the painting end of it really at all. And these I like to use for masking fluid. It's always good to have separate brushes for masking fluid because it will ruin the good brushes. And so I keep mine labeled with tape so that I make sure I don't accidentally paint with them. Sometimes I like to use frog tape to tape my painting down while I work, though not always. You don't have to. If you're going to use a tape, test it first on a scrap piece of paper and leave it there for a while. Let it really kind of sit with it, and then pull it off and see if it tore the paper or not, because a lot of tapes will tear the paper. You have to be careful with what you use. Because I like to turn my paintings around when I work on them, I like to use a board, and this is just a piece of plywood, and then you lay the tape on. You overlap just a little bit. I don't know if you can see that through the tape, but overlap a little bit like that. And then you have an area to work on. And you try not to dump the water all over your painting. And you can turn it around like that. I was trying to fit everything in the camera. You generally want to leave yourself a little bit more room so you don't do things like that. I wanted to show you real quick how to mix a little bit of paint. And because that was also one of the things I was a little bit confused about when I started, especially with the tube watercolors. And so dab a little bit of paint, and you want to start with, a little too much came out, but you want to start with about an even amount of water to the paint clump that you have. This is a good starting point, and then you can add more paint or more water if you need it lighter or darker or more or less saturated. And I kind of do this. It's a little easier in the smaller wells, but that's okay. You can mix with brush bristles, sorry, but for me, I feel like it kind of messes my brushes up a little bit because I don't buy super nice ones usually, and so they kind of tend to get messed up a little more easily. So then you have that. Let's use the favorite. And so then I generally wet my brush and then I dab it. And you also want to make sure that you squeeze the top of the bristles, because a lot of water will hide up in there and then flop down in the middle of your painting and make it look really crappy. And so then Get that, you can dab off extra paint. And there we go. And so that's it. And then you're painting. Then you're off and painting. And if you are mixing a color, like for instance, our blue, say we need purple with our apple, then, yeah, see, I almost did it. I do actually mix with the bristles a lot. It's probably why that one looked like that. So there we go. There's a little bit different color. And there we go. So there's apple. So that's about it. It's pretty simple, and you can see I mixed way too much paint. You're gonna start with just a little bit. You don't need that much, or it'll end up looking like my other palettes. But I hope that that's helped you feel more confident with getting started with the watercolors. They can be super, super frustrating, like pitch your paper across the room type of frustrating sometimes. So for me, it was making washes. I'm terrible at it. But they also can be a lot of fun. They have their own mind a lot of the time, and so they kind of have like a whimsy to them, or like a cat. They just kind of do what they want sometimes. And so it's kind of fun. It's like they take you along for the ride. But let me know if there's a particular watercolor thing you'd like me to make a video on, and I will see what I can do. I am also learning myself, so we can learn together. Thank you for watching.